Okay, so welcome to our next video. You hopefully have watched our previous one, which was the first game where we were combining the hexasim Quatre Bras game with playing the combats out on the tabletop. And if you can recall, we did the combats around Gemincourt, and we played that through on the tabletop, and we've also played that through on the board game. So I need to adjust the board game to give us the actual results of the combat here, but they were very similar. The French have broken through in the centre, and although in the game we played we captured Gemincourt, in this particular scenario on the board game the French haven't yet done that. But I'm sure they'll have a go at that in this turn now their artillery's arrived, and we'll bring that into line with the combat. So what we're going to do today is play the right flank. So this is going to be a combat against the Brunswickers and the French 5th Division and its cavalry division in the 2nd Corps. So we'll do this turn of movement. So we're in the second part of turn 2, so this is 3 PM in the afternoon, and I'll just execute the moves and then we'll get over to deployment on the table. Okay, so Rye did manage to activate and he's moved his troops up, and the Brunswick cavalry have retreated before combat. So we'll then get on to the battle on the tabletop. Alright, hope you enjoy the game, and we'll feed the results back into this on the table later on tonight. Morning everyone, welcome to our next game of General d'Armée. As you watched in the earlier bit of the video, we're playing out the Quatre Bras scenario in the hexasim ball game and transferring the combats onto the table. And this is the combat on the British left flank. Wellington has sent the Brunswick division to occupy some woods on the road to Thal, and we have the French 5th Division and the cavalry division of Ney's forces moving up to try and push them back, seize the road and break communications with the Prussians. Let's have a look at the opposing forces we have on this table so far. We have Pire's light cavalry division, 2 regiments of chasseurs, a large regiment which is the 6th, and a regular size regiment which is the 1st chasseurs with their German style helmets, and 2 regiments of lancers, and they're supported by their own horse artillery brigade here at the edge of the village, and we're starting to get the 5th division under Bachelor starting to arrive. So we've got the 1st regiment of his 1st brigade just coming on the table. Facing off against these, and we may redeploy these slightly as Charlie's with us this morning and he's going to take charge of the Black Brunswickers. So his German troops are currently on the reverse slopes of the hill. In the actual game we've got them deployed on the hill, defending the hill line. So we'll see whether Charlie wants to redeploy, but at the moment they're just moving up to their position. We have the Brunswickers Lancers and Hussar Regiment, which is a large regiment, so I'm breaking that down into 2 units. And then closest to the camera here, we've got their Line Infantry Regiment, and then we should have the avant-garde, sorry, not the avant-garde, the Lieb Battalion and the 2nd Light, but I actually don't have the Lieb Battalion for the Brunswickers, so I've just put on the table 2 of the light battalions for them. Very much everything in black, as we would expect for the Brunswickers. And there's Charlie, or the Duke of Brunswick himself, on the hill looking at the advancing French forces. Alright, we'll crack on with ADCs and initiative for turn 1. Okay, so Charlie has done a redeployment. Charlie, do you want to just give an insight into what your battle plan is?
So I want to keep my infantry back and behind the hills. The artillery is rendered useless.
Yeah.
Because I have no artillery. I also want my cavalry just to delay the enemy cavalry, hopefully. By the time it can actually move and do something against my infantry, it'll be either have loads of casualties or it'll be too late for it to do any charges, so you just won't use it.
Alright, thanks Charlie for your insights into your plan, and this is a delaying action for the Brunswickers. They know they won't be able to hold off the French, but as with all of the early parts of the Quatre Bras battle, the Allies are delaying the French advance so their reinforcements can come up. So we'll play this one out initially over 6 turns, which is the equivalent of one game turn on the hexasim ball game, and see how the Brunswickers do in terms of holding off this French assault. Right, on with initiative. Okay, rolling for initiative. All 3 French brigades are active, and for the Allies, the Line Brigade went hesitant. So we'll roll for initiative, and the Allies are at -1. The Allies roll a 3, that goes down to a 2. French have got 8, so the French start with initiative and movement on turn 1. Okay, so at the end of the first turn, the Bachelet's division is starting to arrive on the table in force. We have the first and his larger brigade now fully deployed. His artillery support is still out of range and unable to support this attack at the moment. He's thrown his skirmish screen forward, and the horse artillery remains in position at the edge of the village. As we look in the village, we can see the start of his second brigade starting to move forward along the road and getting ready to deploy. He's also then thrown his cavalry division forward, so starting with the 2 large chasseur regiments, they are advancing through the gap between the wheat field and that hedge line, advancing reasonably cautiously because they don't know what's on the other side of the hill, with the lancers moving up in support. And there you can see Pire and the commander of the 1st Chasseurs in consultation, ordering that division forward. In the village, Bachelet is actually in position with the horse artillery battery of Pire's division, supervising the advance of his infantry battalions. For the Brunswickers, no major movement on this flank. We've still got the Brunswick skirmish screen. This is part of the avant-garde battalion. We have 1 company deployed with the line units. These are the musket-armed avant-garde. I think there were 2 companies of musket-armed, or 3 companies of musket-armed, and 2 companies of rifle-armed avant-garde, with slightly different uniforms. The musketeers in black and the riflemen in grey. Charlie has done a slight change to his deployment. He moved his cavalry off to the left, with his scouts having seen the French cavalry advance taking place on the other side of the hill. So he's deployed his cavalry over onto the left, and he's deployed his lights in the centre in support of the line battalion. And the only bit of movement this turn, he moved his skirmishers back ever so slightly, so they were all firmly in the wood line and able to fire at the cavalry as they approach and safe from any cavalry charge. And again, you can see the support for the deployed skirmishing rifle companies over there on the left. Right, I don't think there'll be any shooting in this turn. Everything looks like it's out of range, and we'll move on with turn 2. Okay, so we rolled for ADCs, and unfortunately for the French, their chasseurs are a little bit hesitant at the moment. They're obviously concerned about what might be lying in wait on the other side of that head line. They've seen some movement in the trees, think there's something up in that wood line, but can't quite discern what, so they're holding back a bit this turn. The Lancers and the 2 infantry brigades have gone active, and all the Brunswickers are active this turn. So this will be a test at -1 for the French this turn. French get a 9, -1 is an 8, Allies get a 6, so French again have initiative. We'll crack on with movement. Okay, so at the end of turn 2, the French skirmish screen has pushed up to the crest of the hill and is now exchanging musket fire with the Brunswick avant-garde, and the French did well to cause 2 casualties on the Brunswicker skirmishers for none in return. The 1st French brigade on the table is now well clear of the baseline and now approaching the bottom of the ridge. The 2nd brigade is struggling a bit because it's got to funnel through the narrow gap in the village. First 2 battalions are now on the table. The 2nd one is just starting to come through between those buildings at the back. And the French horse artillery has limbered up, and then you can see the limber, the caisson and the mounted artillery crew all moving off from their position to move up to support the assaults in the centre. French cavalry is all stymied by their own brigade going hesitant. No movement from the Brunswickers, they're just bracing themselves for this assault that's unwinding. Alright, that's it for turn 2, on with turn 3. Okay, the French have 1 hesitant brigade. The brigade trying to get through the town's obviously been finding it difficult to get through the narrow confines of the village. So they are hesitant, but the cavalry are all free to move, as is the most advanced brigade here. All Brunswickers were active. So we've got initiative for the French again as we start turn 3. So as you can see, we're using a larger table today. We're using our 6-foot wide table, and therefore the approach moves are churning through pretty quickly as we get into range. Usually when we play on our 4-foot wide tables, we have less manoeuvring before we get into contact. Anyway, so we're at the end of turn 3 now, so the chasseurs have moved forward, clearing and they're blocking position in front of all the French cavalry. So they're now very much at the ridgeline, headed by the 1st chasseurs, supported by the 6th, and again the lancers have now cleared that hedge line. They have been fired on by these Brunswick skirmishers hidden away in this wood line. They have caused a couple of casualties on the French, and we potentially will see some cavalry charges next turn, as although I don't think the cavalry are quite in sight of one another yet. There's a slight ridge which you may or may not be able to see in the hill just in front of that French colonel. So as the cavalry aren't on the ridgeline and aren't within 9 inches of one another, you can't declare a charge if you can't see the enemy. So as one moves up, we might get into contact this turn, but it might be the next. Over on the far flank, you can see again Bachelet's 1st Brigade is now pretty much on the ridgeline, and we'll be getting into contact in the next turn or two. On we go with turn 4. So in turn 4, a very similar role for ADCs. So unfortunately the French brigade coming out of the village has gone hesitant again. We had to allocate all of our successful ADC roles, and we chose to allocate them to this brigade on the left to give it infantry assault, to give it a chance of coming to grips with the Brunswickers and clearing them out of their position. So that did go off successfully, and both our cavalry brigades for the French are active. All the Brunswickers are active, so rolling for initiative, -1 again for the French. Oh, roll the Allies dice again. Allies get 5, French get 6. French are at -1, so that's 5 all, but the French had initiative last turn. So on a draw, they keep initiative for this turn. Okay, so it's the beginning of turn 5, and the combat will start this turn. The French Bachelet's brigade is now up and on the ridgeline. You can see the Brunswickers ahead of it. Did declare a charge last turn, but simply to drive away the Brunswick skirmishers, which passed their discipline test and fell back in front of the French skirmish screen and the French columns as they advanced, and the skirmishers continued to exchange fire. The avant-garde caused some casualties against a 2nd French chasseur brigade on the cavalry flank, and over on this flank the French skirmishing continues to overpower the avant-garde company on this side. They're down to 2 bases, and they've already got 2 casualties on that remaining unit, so that skirmish screen for the Brunswickers nearly evaporated. Alright, on we go, turn 5, initiative, ADCs, and then charges. So the French continue to be unable to employ the full force on the table. They've got another hesitant brigade. This time it's their lancers. We did put a re-roll on the brigade coming through the town to try and increase the chances of that one coming forward. We did need it, but it did come off. So French have 1 hesitant brigade. Brunswickers again have done well. No hesitant brigades for the Brunswickers, so it's a big -1 for the French. Alright, the French get a 6, the Brunswickers get a 7. Even without that penalty, the Brunswickers will win initiative. And they will get to charge first. We are going to charge with the Brunswick Lancers, so we'll see how that plays out and see whether we get any counter charges. Okay, so really hands off stuff in the centre. The Brunswickers have charged up the hill and charged into both the 1st chasseurs here and the 6th chasseurs with their Lancer squadron. And they've committed their brigadier to the attack by the Lancers, and the French have committed their brigadier to the attack by the 1st chasseurs. Over here, the French columns were out of range, and the only one able to charge in was this one over here. So we'll do the charge results and a defensive volley over here, and then we'll do the 2 cavalry attacks. Okay, the Brunswicker volley down here will be, these are reservists, so they count as a standard line battalion because they haven't suffered any casualties yet. And they will volley against the attacking French column. It's at close range, so we get an extra combat dice to the results of this volley. Okay, we roll a 7 and a 4, so that will be 1 extra casualty, and for a standard volley, a 7 is 1 casualty, so that is 3 casualties on that attacking French column. So both battalions have committed their brigadiers to this assault, so this will be a straight roll-off, but at -2 for the French because of the number of casualties they took charging in. Okay, French get a 6, Allies get a 9. Allies get the opportunity for a re-roll, as do the French. I think the French will take a re-roll on that too, can't get much worse. 5, so that's a 9 against a 9. I wonder whether we'll take a re-roll as the Allies. On a infantry versus infantry, the attacker grinds to a halt and volleys. So I think the Brunswickers will take that, so that attacking French column is staggered by the defensive volley from the Brunswickers. They grind to a halt, and the front ranks let off a ragged volley in return. We roll a 6. That does cause 1 casualty on the Brunswickers, but the charge does not go home. Okay, so kicking off first with the assault by the Brunswick Alhans. So they charge in, they have their general in support. Both the Brunswickers and the Chasseurs count as campaign cavalry, so neither get an advantage from that. It'll be +1 for the Brunswickers because they have attached their brigadier. The French Chasseurs are a large unit, so they do give themselves a support roll, so they will be able to re-roll 1 of their dice in this. Alright, let's roll it off, and it's +1 for the Allies. Okay, so we've rolled a 9 for the Allies and 8 for the French. So, do we want to do a re-roll for the French? I think given that we've got 4s, we probably don't, so on a charge result, the Brunswickers will melee, and the defenders countercharge and melee. So the Lancers and the Chasseurs come into contact. Now rolling for the second wing of the Brunswick Hussars, they will go up against the 8 Chasseurs. Again, both are line troops. The Brunswickers are reservists but can have taken no casualties yet. The French, however, get a +1 because they attach their brigadier to this result. So, straight roll-off, no one's got a support in this case. We get a 10 for the French, a 4 for the Brunswickers. That will mean the Brunswickers will not charge home and probably retire from combat. Okay, so rolling off for the Brunswick Alhans against the large regiment of Chasseurs. Brunswickers get +1 for being formed lancers charging home against cavalry, and the Chasseurs get +1 for being a large regiment. In the combat charge resolution, I just forgot to point out that I had been doing this wrong in previous games. The Chasseurs, even though they're a much larger regiment with a much wider frontage, did not have twice as wide a frontage as the Hussars, so they didn't get a +1 benefit in that charge resolution. So we did get it right this turn, and the width rule, I hopefully am now playing correct, so thank you for those who tipped me off to that in the feedback from the videos. Alright, let's roll the combat, so 6 combat dice for each side. Okay, so French only cause 2 casualties, and the Brunswickers cause 2 casualties. Okay, so that's a fight-on result. So I think because the Lancers are in a different brigade, they don't count as a supporting unit, so they can't join the melee. And the other Chasseurs have already fought, so it doesn't feel that they can join as well. So this will be a straight roll-off, 5 dice each side. Is it you just? Oh no, you lose 1, so it'll be 4 dice each side for being unformed. French do better this time, they cause 3 casualties. Indeed, so do the Brunswickers. Both sides cause 3 casualties. So on a second draw, the attacker retires. So both have now suffered 5 casualties. Okay, so we're at the end of turn 6. And as you can see, the French have cleared the ridgeline of Brunswickers. The Brunswick cavalry have fallen back. One of those regiments has taken 5 casualties, but is in good state. The other one did retreat, but has only suffered 3 casualties. So the Brunswick cavalry still got some punch left in it. The Chasseurs nearest the woods have taken now 7 casualties through a combination of skirmish fire and that vicious combat they had with the Brunswick Uhlans. And then the other chasseur regiment's taken a couple of casualties too. From a firing perspective, I do need to do some firing. Actually, that Brunswick light regiment can fire at the chasseurs, so I will do that. As you can see, the horse artillery of the French has now deployed on the top of the hill. Decided not to fire this turn because it doesn't want to suffer a fire discipline casualty, because it would be at -4 for moving and unlimbering this turn. And the Brunswick skirmish screen has been blown away, so the French firing had good effect. Actually, both of those Brunswicker line battalions that are closer to me can fire, so we will just do that firing. I'd missed that, but I presume because the skirmish screen was blown away, it was Brunswicker's initiative, wasn't it? So Brunswickers have to fire first. So no, they can't fire through because they had their skirmish screen in front of them. But the light battalion can indeed fire at the chasseurs. So we'll just go and roll that now. Okay, so the Brunswick light battalion will fire at the chasseurs who won that combat on the hill. This will just be a regular volley. They didn't move, they rolled a 3. That'll be a loss of fire discipline. That's not great for them. Alright, so at the beginning of turn 6, Charlie's just issuing some new orders for the Brunswickers. What are those orders, Charlie?
So hold that line as long as you can, and the cavalry need to just defend against this cavalry, hopefully destroy them, and at least the skirmishers can kill them, and they'll be too weak to carry on. How many turns are left?
About 5 more turns.
Okay, so hopefully the cavalry, when they've taken out our cavalry, if they do, they can't do anything. They won't be able to charge or anything. They'll be too far away.
Okay, all right, we'll play on.
And also we need to counter-charge.
Oh, what, again, do you want to counter-charge against the French columns?
The first row will counter-charge, and the second row will be 6 inches away. So when they fall back, they can find a gap, and they'll be ready to fight, so they won't.
Okay.
To be in a line.
All right, thank you, Charlie. Okay, so as I was just saying to Charlie, I've decided to play this up to turn 12, so that's effectively 2 game turns two game turns for the hexasim board game. Partly because most of that first turn was the approach march for the French, and we're only just getting stuck into combat now. So beginning of turn 6, turn 7 rather, we've rolled for ADCs. Both sides have got all brigades active, which is good news for both, and we'll now roll for initiative, see who's got initiative. Important for the Brunswickers potentially to get the initiative off this turn. Alright, yeah, the Brunswickers have got the initiative, and let's think about charges, then movement in turn 7. Alright, we have some quite tough choices for the Brunswickers here. They do have initiative, which means they can declare charges first, but because the French cavalry took the ground, they're now within 9 inches of those Brunswickers, who are also in the direct line of sights of both the French column and the French horse artillery battery, so that looks a pretty good attacking opportunity for the French. Brunswickers can choose to charge. Perhaps they could charge the artillery battery in line, that might be in range, or they could use their Uhlans squadron, which did not retreat last turn but has taken a lot of casualties. It could declare a charge and try and pin the chasseurs, allowing the Brunswickers to form square potentially. Charlie also wanted to go on the offensive and attack with his lines here. He is the general, so I will follow his orders. So these 2 right-hand Brunswicker battalions in line are going to have a go at charging the French. We'll see how they do in that. We'll move on, have a think through what we're going to do with our Brunswick cavalry, and move on with our charges. Okay, so the charges have been undertaken, and the 2 front Brunswick lines have charged forward. They were in support range of their small skirmish company and the 3rd Brunswick Line Battalion, and the Uhlans have successfully charged. They could do a small wheel. You can do up to 6 inches wheel with your cavalry bonus move. They only had to notch their position ever so slightly and have come in into the first chasseurs à cheval. The 6 chasseurs wouldn't have been able to do opportunity charge because they're blocked. Because the first chasseurs moved forward, the gap in between the woods and the first chasseurs is not sufficient for the 6th to get in and undertake any sort of activity. So they'll be the only charges at this turn. And we did think about whether this French infantry battalion might charge across the face of the guns at the light Brunswicker battalion, but I think we'll have a go at softening them up with the guns first, and going to continue to be threatened by this massive French cavalry as well. So that looks like tactically a good position for the French in the long term, so no need to particularly rush that assault in the here and now. Alright, we'll move to defensive fire for the 2 French columns, and then go on to charge resolution. Okay, so we'll be firing at half effect because we're firing as a column. We'll do the left-hand column first. Rear roll of 5, that will be no casualties on the left-hand charging Brunswick line, and on the second line, better, we roll a 9. For a standard volley, it's 3 casualties and a discipline test. That will be 1 casualty on the Brunswickers and a discipline test. Let's roll the discipline test on the Brunswickers. They roll a 6. That means they will go unformed but continue the charge. Okay, we'll roll off the French versus Brunswick on the left-hand side combat first. Both get +1 because they've both got their commanders thrown into the attack. So both get +1. Let's see what we get. 10 for the Brunswickers, 7 for the French. Now the French do have supports, so the French will re-roll that 1. 4, not good. Okay, but they don't have another support because the next unit is involved in the charge, so and I will not re-roll with the Brunswickers because I potentially want to keep the re-roll for my other attacking battalion, and 10 anyway is a brilliant result, so we've won by 6. Infantry versus infantry, that is victory. Defenders rout and take 1d6 casualties. Great result for the Brunswickers. I did worry about Charlie's logic of doing a charge at this point, but it's really paid off here. Only unfortunately 1 casualty on the French, but we'll move and put them on a rout, which will mean a fault test for this brigade this turn. Okay, so fortunately my brigadier passed the Risk to General test, so he is fine, but this routing battalion has now taken 4 casualties, and it's unformed its support, who, although it tried to be in checkerboard formation, been thrown out someone moving over the ridgeline, so they had to plough back through them. And indeed, for the next charge, this means that the brigade will be faltering, and that will have a negative impact on the next charge result. Alright, we'll do the second unformed Brunswicker line charging into the French column. Okay, so there'll be a net +1 to the French for this test. Okay, so the Allies get a 7, but they do have their supports from this unit here, so we will re-roll that 1. Okay, so that gives the Allies a 9 against the French result of an 8. The French also have supports, and we will give it a go. So we will re-roll that. That's terrible. That's a 6. It was a net +1 for the French, so that takes that to a 7. So the Allies have won by... Oh, we've got 2 re-rolls. They are at -1 because this is closed columns. But we'll have another re-roll as well, as we both have a flank and a rear support here. So this again will be at -1. 5 and 5, -1 is 9, so that's 9 against 9. That'll be +1 to the French, so this charge will go in at a -1 result. Going unformed, the Brunswickers aren't able to charge in, and they stutter to a halt, but they do let off a volley against that French column, which will be unformed, and they don't cause any casualties on the French. So that's it. That's the charge reactions for the infantry. Let's go on to the lancers. Okay, so this charge will be at +2 to the French. +1 because the Brunswickers are 5 casualties, and because they're reservists, that takes them down to recruits, which takes them to a morale grade lower as well. So this will be +2 to the French for the charge result. Okay, we get 8 for the Allies and 9 for the French. The French have a re-roll, but I think we might leave it on a 9 as we're winning anyway, and don't want to put that at risk. So that's a charge result at +1. Cavalry versus cavalry, we go into melee. Alright, we'll move the figures in. Okay, so we'll now do some firing for the French. The Brunswickers have fired their skirmish line in the woods and not caused any casualties on the French cavalry. We'll now open fire with this French column. against that Brunswickers in front of them. They get a 9. Alright, so that is 3 casualties and a discipline test. It'll only be 1 casualty, so it'll be halved. And let's then just roll the discipline test for the Brunswickers. That's an 8 minus 1 because of the casualty is a 7. They are fine. Okay, so now an important one. We're going to fire our horse artillery battery at close range against the Brunswick lights. Let's see what we get. Whoa, 3. They clearly weren't ready to fire. Still in setup, and that's a fatigue casualty on themselves. Okay, so our next cavalry melee of the game. The French have got a slight advantage here. The Brunswickers have already taken 5 casualties, so they'll only be attacking with 4 dice, plus 1 because they're lancers against cavalry. And the French will be on 5 dice plus 1 because their morale goes better than their opponents. Let's see who wins this combat. Okay, so what we got here? 1, 2, 3. 3 casualties for the French, only 1 for the Brunswickers. That's not great. So the French win by 2 on a cavalry versus cavalry combat. Means cavalry winner returns to his own lines. And the Brunswickers retreat. And our general subject to a retreat result, so he has to do a destiny test. A 5. No, he's fine, and he falls back to his other regiment. Okay, now rolling for the French, we have 3 ADCs. We're going to employ 2 on Bachelar's brigade because it is on also. Did I do that the wrong way around? Were the Brunswickers faltering at all? I think I got myself completely confused. The Brunswickers weren't faltering at all, so I didn't need to roll a 5 for them. They just went active. It's the French who were faltering. Sorry about that, made that mistake. Always a bit of a challenge to remember quite what's going on when you don't necessarily pop all the counters down like you should. But here, this has reminded me, yeah, it's this brigade that's faltering. So the French have 3 ADCs. They're going to put 2 on Bachelar's brigade. And then they'll put another one on their lancers because they want to start bringing them up. To support the assault on the Brunswick line. Okay, so let's roll for Bachelar's faltering brigade. Gets a 2, that's not good. We will take our reroll. A 1, that is terrible. I think that's a Savoy keeper. The brigade loses its ADC permanently. Routing units disperse. Skirmish line disperses. All others retreat and lose 2 casualties, and it remains faltering. Well, well done, Brunswickers. Terrible result for the French. Okay, so pretty disastrous result for the French there. So they've been pushed back off the ridge. The 1st Battalion breakings caused the whole column to falter and slip backwards off the ridge in reflection of that counterattack by Charlie. The horse artillery battery is still there, but looking a bit exposed now. Might be able to drive that off by advancing the Brunswickers a bit more. But the French did get their cavalry active and their other infantry brigade active. So not a too bad result for the French. Well, not a great result, but not catastrophic. Catastrophe, that's the word. French are testing at +1 here because they had 1 hesitant brigade, the Allies had 2. Alright, French have got initiative in turn 8. Okay, so the French 1st Regiment and French Lancers has swung around the chasseurs through the gap caused by the regiment returning its own lines. 2nd Regiment with Lancers there in the distance is reformed to allow it to move up in support of its colleagues. The 6th Chasseurs has maintained positions and unfortunately it's just continuing to take pretty galling fire from those skirmishes in the woods, which you can't do anything about. It's up to 9 casualties now, but being a large regiment, it's pretty resilient. The horse artillery battery remains on the hill, and the French line infantry battalions are just starting to move up from the other of Bachelar's brigades. We'll see whether this other one can recover from its falter test next turn. The Brunswickers haven't really done anything. The unformed regiment has reformed itself up, but everything else was hesitant, so has remained where it was. The only action of the turn really will be the firing of the horse artillery battery again, going at the line regiment and trying to get bounce Well, no, it's close range, so there won't be any bounce through. So just firing canister at that close battalion. 4. It really didn't bring its ammunition with it today, did it? So at close range, that will be half a casualty. So on a 4, 5 or 6, that'll be a casualty on the Brunswickers. It is! Some success at least. First casualties on that Brunswicker line battalion. So good activation in turn 9. All Brunswick's brigades are active, and for the French, their 3 brigades that aren't on Alta have gone active. Now the all-important falter test. They did get 3 ADCs, so they allocated 2 of them to this faltering brigade, so we will get a reroll. Let's hope it doesn't disappear off the table for the French. It's a 6. That's a rally, that's obey orders. Alright, we can attack this, keep the attack rolling in, but not long to go. The Brunswickers have orders to start falling back after the end of turn 12. So can they hold the French off for another 3 turns? It's looking pretty good so far, but we'll see how these play out. Okay, in turn 9, everyone's getting ready for the final assault. So the French cavalry is starting to marshal itself on the hill, 2 regiments of lancers moving up. The chasseurs who've taken so many casualties have stepped back, trying to take themselves out of skirmisher range. The artillery battery will keep having a go at the French. The Brunswickers ahead of it. And the Brunswickers have all stepped back to try and make sure that they've got sufficient range to form square if they need to, if they are charged. And the French 2 brigades are now starting to resume their advance. We'll just do the firing from the Brunswick skirmishers against the chasseurs. They're just still within range of the rifles. God, that's 2 more casualties. That's been really effective. They're now up to 11 casualties on that regiment. And then we will fire the French artillery. This is going to be at effective range now, outside of close range, so they will get bounced through against the 2 Brunswicker light battalions. And we roll a 7, our first decent roll for our artillery battery. So at effective range, that is 1 casualty, and then we get a bounce through, and 1 more casualty against the unit to its rear. We'll mark those up. Okay, so turn 10 did not go well for the French, just in terms of ADCs. We've lost an ADC permanently for the terrible result on this left-hand brigade. As a result, we only got 1 ADC off, and we've got our left-hand brigade and our lancers being hesitant. Our reinforcing brigade is also active, but then the chasseurs have also gone hesitant. For the Brunswickers, their hussars are hesitant, but no major problems for the Brunswickers. So again, we won't see much movement in turn 10. It's not looking great for the French breakthrough. Again, another shot for the French artillery battery. Let's see, this is the 4th turn of firing. Let's see if we can get a half decent roll. Can still fire at the same target. It has to fire straight ahead and can only fire at effective range, but those Brunswick lights are at that effective range. Hey, that's better. Law of averages have come in there at last. So at effective range, a 10 is 3 casualties and a discipline test on the Brunswickers, and no casualty on the bounce through. So that will take the front battalion up to 4 casualties, so this discipline test will be at -1. Okay, let's roll a discipline test for that front unit of Brunswick light infantry. It's an 8, -1 is 7. They're fine. Really doesn't look like it's the French day. A day for the French commander. Alright, turn 11, 2 to go. Okay, this is really turning into a real result for the French. Again, their lancers and this left-hand brigade went hesitant. Clearly the falter test early in the game has completely thrown this brigade, and the loss of its brigadier. They're really struggling to get a new chain of command activated. So simply our central brigade has been able to move forward in that narrow gap. The only thing that will happen this turn will be shot from that French artillery battery, and then the Brunswickers will also get a defensive volley off against that approaching French column. Let's do the French artillery fire first, again at effective range. Again, another decent roll. They get an 8. Finally, they've got their eye in. That'll be 2 casualties, and then the bounce through doesn't do anything, but 2 more casualties against the Brunswick light infantry. Okay, so the Brunswickers will fire back at this approaching French column. Unfortunately, they've taken 7 casualties now, so they are now recruits rather than reservists. Their status has been downgraded, so this will be an inferior volley, and it'll be at -1 because of their casualty level. Wow, well, they do well. They get a 10 on an inferior volley. Falls down to a 9, so that's 2 casualties on that French column and a discipline test. The French get a 5, so their column goes unformed. and that whole attack looks like it's stymied for turn 12. Okay, so the French column will have fired back as well. It rolled an 11, it fired before the Brunswickers, but it would have been an inferior volley because it moved and at half effect. So inferior volley is 3 casualties in a discipline test, half effect is 1, so another casualty on the Brunswickers and another discipline test. They get a 7, that'll be at -2, so they go unformed. Alright, okay, this is the final action of the game. So the French have charged in against the Brunswickers, and they've got their second light cavalry regiment support. They've got a chance, potentially, to damage the French from the Brunswick Hussar Brigade. And in the centre here, we will continue some firing against that light battalion, see if we can possibly break that light battalion. So it might not be all over, but it would be a dramatic turn if the action on this last turn of the game can change the result, which looks like a solid Brunswick defensive performance. Alright, here we go, turn 12, final turn of the game. Okay, so this is a straight roll-off. Both brigades have their commanders attached. The Allied brigade is at not over 50% casualties, so it is not demoralised, but the French do have supports. Alright, let's see what we get. The French do have the opportunity for a re-roll of 1 dice. Which is good for the French, because they've definitely lost that one. Well, that's like the game's been all along. Great victory for the Hussars. So on cavalry versus cavalry, that's going to be a -5. Attacker melees unformed, defender countercharges and melees with elan. Alright, well there's still a chance in the hand-to-hand combat. We'll see whether the French can pull it off there. Now before we get to the hand-to-hand combat, got one more shot with the artillery battery and a shot with the Brunswicker lights and the column that are facing them. Alright, so the Brunswickers have initiative, so their column will fire first. It is unformed. It will be a volley at -2 for being unformed and -2 for casualties, and it'll be an inferior volley, so don't expect too much from this from the Brunswickers. No, and on a double one, they simply lose fire discipline. Alright, that'll be no effect because they're not going to get charged this turn because the French battalion has already missed the charge opportunity because it was itself unformed. Okay, it will now fire. This will be a volley at half effect because it's in column, and -2 because it's unformed. A 6, that's not going to get us very far. Standard volley, -2. It itself loses fire discipline, so no effect from the French volley from the column. Alright, and then finally the French artillery battery will fire, and it will get a bounce through as well against the light battalion to the rear. A 7, and they will cause a bounce through casualty as well, so a 7 is 1 casualty on the Brunswickers and 1 on bounce through, but no discipline tests, they hang on. Okay, so this hand-to-hand long combat looks like it'll be a good one for the Brunswick Hussars. So they've got a elan, that takes them up 1 dice, so they will be on 6, and the Lancers are simply on 4 because they are unformed. Right, let's see how they do. Alright, oh, not too bad. It's actually a draw. 3 casualties to both sides. There you go. So that will go to a second round of combat, unless the defender chooses to retire. Okay, so I think the Brunswick Hussars are going to take the wise rather than the valorous decision. They've crunched in and countercharged the Lancers. They held them in the first round of combat, and the 2 units recoiled for a second. The Brunswickers have the opportunity to choose to retire, which will take them back off the table edge, and the Lancers will take the ground unformed. That will be what they choose to do, because if they fight the second round of combat, they lose their elan bonus and will be unformed, will only have 4 dice. Their Lancers opponents will have 4, and the second Lancer unit can come in as well, which will give it 5 light dice as well. So that will be 9 dice to 4 to the Lancers. Okay, so that's it. That's the end of the game. The Brunswickers have certainly significantly delayed this flanking attack from Thal towards Quatre Bras. The Brunswick cavalry did a sterling job, but both brigades, both regiments now have retreated off table, and the Brunswick infantry, already stepping back, will continue to retire. The casualties in the game are pretty light for the Brunswickers. All of their infantry battalions are pretty much intact. The front light battalion has taken about 50% casualties, and both of their cavalry regiments have taken a fairly significant mauling, 50 to 60-70% casualties on their 2 cavalry regiments. For the French, very few casualties for the French. They 1 unit routed and dispersed off the table, but apart from that, their infantry battalions were pretty much untouched. They did take very heavy casualties on one of their chasseur regiments, but again, their lancers are in good health. So again, I quite enjoyed that game. It really didn't turn out like I expected. I expected the Brunswickers to be overwhelmed, and certainly halfway through the game, with the French artillery battery on the hill, the French brigades moving up, and the Brunswickers looking like they were about to be pinned in square, it seemed very much all over for them. But they turned it around, and they've been able to conduct a fighting withdrawal. We'll play those results out on the table, on the board game, on hexasim, and I'll bring the results of that to you in the later part of this video, see whether the results are in any way similar, and then we'll adjust those results to reflect the game as we actually played it. Hope you enjoyed the game, and look forward to seeing you all next time. Cheers. Okay, so just transferred the results onto this table and onto the board game, and also done the completion of the 3 PM game turn. So as we look here at the Brunswickers, we can see I've applied the losses, and the Brunswickers have fallen back from the first crest line into the woods themselves, and further back trailing flank, and their cavalry unit has taken 50% casualties. It's under that Brunswick leadership counter, and the all-hand counter has been removed, and the 6th Chasseurs Cheval is now a casualty. See it over on our casualty markers, and the rest of the infantry have advanced, and advancing out of the stream towards Quatre Bras. Over here, the Rise Corps has continued its advance, continued to push back the damaged remnants of the Dutch Belgians. A couple more Dutch Belgian units have been overwhelmed as they try and pull back towards the stream and over to the far side of the stream. And then you've got Picton's forces, which have also taken some casualties from an early French attack. 1 unit of that formation is routing, but should get rallied by Wellington or Orange in the next full turn. So that's it at the end of this turn. It looks like the next one will be an attack by Ray against Picton's division, holding the other side of the stream, halfway between Gemincourt and Quatre Bras. A pretty good defensive position for them there. Should be able to hold on, I very much hope, if I'm a British player. Hopefully Rye might be able to break through before too many British reinforcements arrive. So we'll see how that one plays out as we play our next scenario of Quatre Bras. Alright, hope you enjoyed the game, and look forward for this one carrying on either next week or in a couple of weeks' time. Cheers.